All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order. It is 7 o'clock. I don't believe we have a quorum, so I don't think we can have a true meeting, but we can have a listening session. So that brings us to item number 3.
We're way ahead.
Yes, we are. Mike, right? And Matt. Great. These guys are from Central New Hampshire Regional Planning.
We were here last time. Mike Cardiff, Matt Taylor. We wanted well, tonight we talked about, we wanted to discuss the potential at exit 17, 18, and 106. We had a couple of things on the agenda about, want to talk about some demographics and some options, and Matt's going to cover a lot of that. But at our last meeting, last time we were here, I think there was a request to get a little bit more context. How does this all work? What are we doing here? What's the planning board doing with this master plan? How this all can lead to the support of any modifications? So if anybody saw the handout, we do have a handout that kind of lays out the process. And if anybody needs one, we have some up right up front here. So basically, the master plan is an advisory document. It's a planning board process, a planning board document.
Ben, could you join us as an alternate, please?
Nice. So it's an advisory document, it's a planning board's document, and it's basically provides support for the zoning ordinance. If your zoning ordinance, when you have your zoning ordinance in place, there should be support of the master plan. And if you're thinking about making some changes, when you update the master plan, which is, every 10 years or so, those things that you would want to change really have to be, they come up through the master plan. And that's what, an opportunity for many meetings like this to talk about, some potential changes, including potential changes at exit 17 and 18, kind of come up with the master plan. Again, it's advisory though, and it's the planning board's document. To approve a master plan, to adopt a master plan, is just like a regulation. It's not going to town meeting. It's a duly noticed public hearing or series of public hearings by the planning board, followed by a vote by the planning board to adopt.
You said last time that everything went to town meeting and was voted on, so it wasn't true what you were saying before.
Sure, that's when we get to zoning changes. The master plan itself, though, is a planning board document.
Which includes zoning changes.
You're discussing the zoning changes, but you would never approve a zoning change unless you went to town meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Surveys, meetings like this, a lot of public input, talking to a lot of different boards, that's all part of the public process like this meeting. Again, it's planned for tomorrow. We're expecting to be done. We've been at this a couple of years. We've got slowed down a bit by COVID, but looking to be finishing up the master plan well in time for anything that will go to the town meeting process.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Do you have a comparative document? What's changing in this master plan? Or what would be plus any changes to the equal?
So we would have that in the executive summary, and to be honest, a lot of what the planning board has been working with started with the plan for tomorrow from 10 years ago. And that's definitely part of the summary and that executive summary when we're done. We're not quite done yet, but yes.
The previous one is on the town website. If you want to look at it.
No, I've seen it. I'm just curious what for us to effort and all.
So, and again, we're gearing up for town meeting season, and if there are zoning changes that are proposed, a series of public hearings, making our way to March. And if you take a look through the handout, zoning changes, approved by a majority of voters. Goes into effect at town meeting. And, you know, one of the things that we have talked about is that, you know, there seems to be a definite interest in making, if there are changes, incremental changes. So we're not looking at making major changes through, well, especially when you're working through a first cycle in a town meeting season. And finally, we have a flow chart on the back that just basically outlines some of those, you know, what the planning board does, you know, a key part of the planning board's work is adopting a master plan, but also capital improvements programs, you know, making recommendations for zoning ordinance, making modifications to the subdivision and site plan regs when necessary, and then below that, you know, underneath all of those that flow chart is the separate activities of the zoning board of adjustment. So we had been asked for, you know, kind of how it all ties together. Again, the master plan is a planning board document, zoning changes are town meeting. So with that, Matt, a little,
Sure. So if you didn't get a chance, there's a handout called Demographics and Student Enrollment up there. I'm just going to kind of go through some of these graphs and kind of talk about some of the trends that we've seen in working on this update that we plan for tomorrow. So the first slide is a pretty simple one. It just shows population growth in Canterbury from 1960 to 2020. And if you look at it, you can see that from 1960 to 2010, there was a pretty significant kind of a rapid rise in population. It's leveled off since then. What this doesn't show, which is kind of interesting though, is Canterbury, the trending population in Canterbury going back even further. And I'm sure some of you know, Canterbury's population actually peaked in 1820. And it did not hit that milestone again until the 2000 census. So there was a significant period of decline in population, and recently, in the last 50 years or so, there was a rapid increase. And the data right now is showing that it's leveled off, and actually the growth from in the last decade for Canterbury was slower than the county and the state as a whole. Projections to 2040 show that Canterbury is probably going to grow up at about the same rate as the state and the county. So, with the last decade, there's been a modest increase, but there have been some changes that we've seen in the demographics. Housing units have been fairly modest increases. It's been roughly about 5 per year over the last decade. There was a spike in the number of new permits in 2020. And that, we've seen that in a lot of towns, and it is related to the pandemic. And, you know, I'm sure you've probably seen a lot of people, there have been a lot of people moving to New Hampshire from further south. So I think that has something to do with that. One of the things that we have seen, though, looking at Canterbury compared to some other towns, is Canterbury is almost exclusive. Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I got it. Yep, I'm Matt Taylor. I'm a planner with the regional planning. Sorry about that. So, Canterbury, though, as far as the makeup of residential units, Canterbury is almost exclusively single family, which in some towns it is different than that. So one of the trends, and this was pointed out, and we're going to get a little bit into the what we've learned in the visioning sessions that we've had, but one of the trends is that the population in Canterbury, as in the rest of the state, is aging fairly significantly. The median age in Canterbury from 2000 was 42, a little over 42. Today it's almost 48 is the median age. And there's actually been a flip too with number of young people. Back in 1990, the number of young people was 7.5%. Today, they represent. I'm sorry, the number of young people is 0 to was 7.5%, today it's 4%. So there's been a decrease in school-age children, but definitely an increase in people over the age of 55, and that's been borne out by census data. So, looking at school enrollment, and we did look at figures from the Department of Education, there has been a decline, which kind of follows the decline in school-age children down. There's been a decline in school enrollment. Student population, go ahead.
Just a caveat to that, just because it shows a decline, we still have school-age children. The state just doesn't track private school kids. So kids who are homeschooled or go to private school, they don't get tracked on this chart.
Not in the Canterbury Elementary, but I will talk about this. The state also has numbers just for the town itself, and we look at that, and that's for all school-age children, and that has also shown a decline. That is a good point. So as far as Canterbury Elementary, right down the street, that one of the things that came up when we did the visioning sessions was there was a concern about keeping the school in town, and it's part of the community. As far as enrollment goes, though, it peaked in 2006 at about 140. Today, the enrollment is a little over 100, about 105, I think, as of last year. And that is, to your point, high school students, actually, high school age students, which the Department of Education does break it down by grade for everybody in the town of Canterbury. And that figure, let me see if I can find it here in my notes. In the year 2016-17, there were 98 high school age students. Today, there's 47. At school year 22-23, it was 47. So there has been a decline kind of across the board in school age children, and that's been true across the state. It's not unique to Canterbury, that's for certain. So we've had 2 visioning sessions, and we've had a number of other meetings like this to get feedback, and that's what this is all about. But what we've heard so far, particularly in those visioning sessions, there's a summary page just on some of the major issues that came up. The first one, and I think the biggest one, was that community character matters. And particularly in Canterbury, there was a concern about keeping the rural character, the historic character, and also preserving the agricultural heritage in Canterbury. So character is definitely, what we heard in the vision sessions is character is a big issue for residents. But there's also been an acknowledgement, there was an acknowledgement in the change in demographics. And there was a general consensus that it would be good for Canterbury to attract more young people to town. I think, and it's true in a lot of towns in New Hampshire, you see the same volunteers for the boards. Often the volunteers are getting older, and it's hard to get younger people to get involved in the community. And part of that is just the change in demographics. There aren't as many younger people in town. So, also housing affordability, that was something that was acknowledged in the vision sessions as an issue. And also the diversity of housing, because some people are getting older and want to downsize. There isn't that diversity, there's a lot of, big, beautiful old farms, but the household sizes in town and across the state have shrunk, and it's a lot to maintain for a few people just to live in an old farm or old estate. So one of the things I think that was also that came out, and it's kind of why we're here tonight, or I think we want to discuss more, is the highway exits and Route 106 were seen as an opportunity for the town and to expand the tax base, potentially diversify housing opportunities.
Who sees it as an opportunity?
That was.
Central New Hampshire Planning Commission, the
No,
people they
that wasn't
represented
me.
during the last
That
meeting who
was-
were dressed up in suits,
Excuse
sitting
me.
up front?
Excuse me, the vision, in the vision sessions that we had, we actually, that came up over and over again, that those highway exits were an opportunity. And we
Not an
tried.
opportunity for the residents, because it wouldn't be a benefit to
Well, this
us.
is coming
You
from-
put it up to different maybe
Excuse
open
me,
houses.
please, could we have a question and answer period after they're done presenting?
Sorry, I'll raise my hand every
Please.
time. My
And if
apologies.
you do, speak, please give your name and the road you live on. Please, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
But yeah, no, I'll just about, please, we can cover that.
Thank you.
So, there was, and there was also another item that came up was the need to improve infrastructure, particularly broadband internet was a common theme, that came up, that there's a need for better internet.
There's definitely some gaps in broadband that we've heard about, and it sounds like there's some work being done right now to expand some of those, into some of those underserved areas.
Yeah, I think, the select board is actually, we've actually, agreed to have someone represent us in that, regard. So just moving forward.
So, also in the vision sessions and in planning board meetings, there have been some ideas that have been discussed, kind of kicked around ways to address some of the concerns that have been brought up in the vision sessions. And there are a couple of sheets that, in the handout that just kind of discuss some of the things that have been talked about at the planning board level. One is mixed uses, and that's that at the visioning session, mixed uses was encouraged at the highway uses to look at that potentially. Right now, they're exclusively, there's commercial off of exit 17 and industrial off of exit 18, and pretty limited number of uses. So that was one of the things that came up. Also, character-based zoning incentives. There's, and actually at the end of it, I give an example. If you look at the last page, I give an example of kind of an incentive if the board wanted to look at that, would be using farmhouses differently than the way they are now. Because farmhouses are, they're big, they're too big often for a single family, but they have been renovated in other towns in New Hampshire. And those examples are in Warren and Kentucky, for providing more housing, but still looking exactly the same and fitting in with the character of the town. And lastly, I know the boys talked about cluster neighborhoods. Right now, the town has a cluster development ordinance, and the planning board is looking at refining that, and maybe making it a little more usable and maybe a little more in tune with the town's character. So I guess those are some of the ideas that we've talked about with the board. I guess we can go with the questions or discussion.
We wanted to bring up that whole idea about cluster, because it can be utilized in the the area around exit 18, and it does tie back to the whole idea of character-based zoning, and some add some examples there that through incentives, the planning board could lay out opportunities to maybe there's a little bit more density, but you've actually had a development that perhaps has a bit more of that feel of Canterbury, that type of kind of rural architecture.
And one thing I would say about mixed use too, which I forgot to mention, is Canterbury has two wonderful examples of mixed use villages. One is a museum now, which everybody's familiar with, Shaker Village, but if you look at the buildings, a lot of those buildings were actually mixed use. The brick building in particular, that was an office and a residence at one time. So there's certainly examples in Canterbury, and I think examples that people cherish, but you can't do that today under the current zone. You can't build a mixed use village or have mixed uses in a single building.
Yes, sir, in the back.
Please explain to the residents of Canterbury how changing the zoning at exit 18 from commercial to mixed use would benefit the
What's
residents.
your name, please?
Nobody's had to state their names in prior meetings, so I refuse to state my name. I'm a resident of Canterbury,
Okay, fine.
20 plus years. Yeah.
It's not my job to decide. It's up to the residents really what you want. And we're just kind of relaying what's been said so far.
My take on that one is, if we aren't proactive and do something ourselves, it's going to happen without our control. One way or another, that corridor is going to change.
Let's change it back to agricultural land. That big piece of land that's just south of exit 18 on the east side of the highway. Why don't we make that agricultural, change the zoning to make it ag? That would be a good idea. And it would stay the same. There might be a farm there, that would be nice. But no, we want to put up a bunch of houses in there.
I'm writing down just as a,
Yeah,
I
it's
say
a great suggestion. Yeah, that piece that's just south of exit 18 on the east side of the highway.
Yeah,
It's owned by some big commercial
yeah,
company
yeah,
now.
I know, yeah, we want.
It'd be fun to make that agricultural.
I don't know what the soils are like there.
Well, on the other side, they seem to be pretty good, so I don't think it'd be much different.
Yeah, I think that's been stripped, and they actually used to.
we got a map here, you want to point out 18, I'm sorry.
It's in the lower right hand corner, that one.
Is
Yeah.
it the one right across, it's right across from the exit way? Yeah. Yeah,
That's across from the abandoned gas station.
yeah.
I'm gonna totally pivot real quick. When you have the population demographic, roughly 37.5% of the town is 55 and older right now. With that being said, the projections don't seem, if we look at the population projections, you guys sort of deviate that you're guessing that growth is all gonna be younger families, or are you trying? I don't know if I'm being clear, but when you look at the projections, it's only going up a couple hundred people over the next 15 years. Are you trying to project an age demographic, or are you assuming that 37% is going to get replaced by 35-year-old people?
So we're getting older. We're not really projecting anywhere in the state to grow that. I mean, you take a look, we're looking at kind of a flat line in our growth through 2040. And that's just a national, trend as well. So the effects of the baby boom, that's just, that baby boom is moving through. I'm a baby boomer. And basically we're projecting that, yes, there'll be some younger families.
I'm saying, is that bell curve, are we just essentially projecting the bell curve is just going to age up at that same rate? Is that making sense?
Yeah, I don't think that projection, I don't think it doesn't project by age. That's the growth model that was used in the regional housing needs assessment. I don't
Takes a
think,
look at births and deaths and in-migration and it's an estimate.
yeah, the trend in the census data has been showing aging, but that number doesn't project that really.
Because I was just wondering, like, in terms of, we talk about this long-term zoning or the types of cluster developments or communities, would that help dictate whether we push 55 and older communities, or we try and push 1,600 square foot younger family communities? I guess I'm just wondering how the projections and the demographics relate to what type of development would be suited for the town.
And that's kind of an open-ended question. I think that's,
So I would say, housing types, those smaller housing units appeal to those younger families or smaller families, as well as seniors. And, basically those are two demographics that are competing for those assets.
Because we talk about affordability, I mean, if you're familiar with Goffstown, crossing the door, obviously, they just put 40 some odd 55 and older units that all sold for $500,000 or more. That's not affordable for people trying to downsize. So I was just curious to see how the demographics correspond to what you guys as the planning commission see or are sensing in sort of development trends for the future.
I think it's kind of a theme in what we were talking about as well at some of the earlier visioning sessions is that sometimes there's and Matt alluded to it as well, there's a mismatch between what's out there and what people are looking for. And, you know, my little house in the south end of Concord, that was way too small, and we had 3 kids bouncing around, and it was the right size. You know, but there aren't that many of those 1,700 square foot houses being built.
Yes, sir.
I just had a quick question. Is it, if I, Concord, is it, the zoning in Canterbury it does not allow multifamily by right anywhere, correct? It's by special exception only in certain areas?
I believe that is correct.
Okay, so that's kind of the big picture we're talking about here is multifamily isn't really allowed in town, currently, by zoning.
If you want to.
Well, by special exception, and you can.
Right, but not by right. So I think that's kind of what's being discussed, is that cool for going into the future or not? I mean, that's simple as that.
Well,
And
it
then the other
sounds-
thing is, one more thing. I believe entities are allowed to build what's called workforce housing wherever they want by state law. They can come in here and by state law, they can somehow, make that happen. I think what this gentleman was saying is trying to get ahead of that is a smart thing, but I think it could happen anyways.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And then the third point is neither one of these commercial zones has any type of infrastructure whatsoever. Water, sewer, nothing. So,
Now there's rail. It's not in
yes, it has rail. Part of it almost does because it's flying into the river, but that's another topic. Anyways, those are my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Just had a question of Tom Gillette. I had a question about the aging population. As I read the green lines here, which is 2020, I see a spike in the kind of 65 to 55 age range. But I think we're failing to also notice the significant growth in the 15 to 24 and the 25 to 34. And so it's not as large, but there is, over the last 10 years, a younger population coming to town.
Absolutely.
And so I think it's important to remember that and try to find ways to maximize that.
Anybody else?
Do we know if that change that Tom was just talking about is from people moving in or people growing up here and staying? I'm sure it's both, but do we know the proportion?
We have the kind of the state in-migration numbers. We don't have those numbers down to Concord, or down to Canterbury. But, there is some in-migration that's added to that, and that was a greater number back in the 80s and 90s.
Sue Russell, so are we talking about then these 2 exits, right?
Yeah, and also, the plan was talk about what might happen at 106.
In the
yes,
commercial area along there.
Yeah, and what other uses, or if any other uses you might want to include, or permit other than what's allowed right now.
So the one that I was thinking about, that property from that, already, there's nothing there, there's no trees, it's side farming. Agricultural, also, whoever owns it, maybe they could be helped with, turning it into a solar farm. But that's totally open. So that's a possibility too. It's kind of stays open space in a weird way. And then there's a possibility of whoever owns that making, because it's already commercial, it's not commercial, it is commercial already. That one is.
Yes.
So, one thing that we've been looking at the acreages in the different areas, there really isn't a lot of acreage at exit 17 compared to the exit 18 area. There's some opportunity there for, some additional development if so be, but there is more opportunity for that along at exit 18, just nature of just the area. think we're talking about, you know, a mix of uses, which would include residential, which would include accessory dwellings, and, you know, that accessory dwelling unit over a garage.
Okay.
You know, there's been some discussion kind of at the planning board level about just a little more activity, creating a safer space.
Okay, I wanted to ask if we had thought about or discussed something like a community center, or like something to help people in town reinvest, I guess, holistically, all around in the town, like in the life of the town. Because there's not too much in town that stays active after a certain period of time. But if we try to do things that brought people together, gave people reasons to stay around each other, you know, post the 5 o'clock hour or 6 o'clock hour, that's not just the country store, which I don't mind. I love country store and happy there is, but if there were other options, it might be, you know, it's a thing that brings, if you're looking at ways to bring in younger age demographics, that's a way to do it. There needs to be something said for places to be together.
Thank you.
As a dad who spent a lot of time at Fieldhouse Sports in Bow, those are one of those places that draws a lot of, you know, just different kids and.
Mm-hmm. And I've mentioned, like in general, this might be getting too off topic, but I've also talked to Rachel at the library about keeping the library open later Sunday for that reason. So just something like that.
How does the projection for the Concord side of exit 17 kind of impact on Canterbury's side? I know a couple of years ago they proposed like 650 condo units over there, and I know it's getting held up in the planning process.
There were about 600 units on Whitney. There's been a number of larger proposals in the Concord area that are working their way through, some slower than others.
I mean, I just wonder if that changes our perspective of trying to put housing in there versus can we monetize it better by putting small businesses? You talk about a village. Could we have a mixed use that promotes our small businesses over there to take that foot traffic across while giving us a better tax impact?
I think there's all kinds of opportunities. There's more activity there now. That's the question of the planning board is, you know, what do you want to promote there?
I think that's actually, both of those options sound like great ideas, because if you put housing next to businesses, then you can have more walkable spaces
Yes.
and more community-centered spaces.
You don't have to drive?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't have to come from the corner of town to get to the center, even though I love the center, and I will stay here like 12 hours a day sometimes.
Well, that is an, you know, possibility.
Because there's plenty of room, so I feel like both is possible.
In the exit 17 area, there's a lot of conservation land, and it gets, but there is some room there for mixing uses.
Touching back, Felipe, I think Felipe's also good. My name's very long, sorry. Not sorry. For something like the community center, I think, at least for my own personal wishes or dreams, I think something that's really helpful for investing in community, something that I love about Canterbury as a younger person that's recently moved here, is that it's filled with matches of different crafts. It's filled with older craftsmen. Like, I think something like that would be an excellent place for them to teach skills that are going to be going away to younger people, because, you know, learning that, like, David Lamb, Kevin West, Mark Hopkins are all in town blew my mind. So I think it's something, like, there has to be something spoken to keeping arts specific to this area of the country alive.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, as your ideas coalesce, because there's a sort of pretty big spread here. How do you, putting it in context regarding tax policy? Because it's one thing to say, hey, great, across the river in Concord, because they've already done it. They're ahead of us there. And their tax mechanism is a lot different than Canterbury's. So my question is where do you take the plan, wherever you coalesce around ideas, whether it's small business, cluster, younger people housing. And then the second question I have to whomever is, some of the suggestions about affordable housing, you don't look at tax policy. It doesn't matter. I mean, you got property now selling here, raw property at $600,000-700,000. We're not even talking about, 2x4 number one or block number one in a foundation, and your land values are just going off the map. So I'm trying to understand how these ideas come together with the planning board, and then how does that relate to tax policy in town?
There's a lot of questions in there. Matt, you wanna start?
Well, I think it's, as far as tax policy goes, I think that the town has to look at, the positive, is it a positive on the tax base? Whether it's residential, usually people think residential is a negative, and it can be, but it also can be a positive. And one of the things I would say about the schools is you have declining enrollment, but there are a lot of fixed costs in those schools. That declining enrollment hasn't translated to a decline in school budgets. At least that's what I'm guessing. And the reason is because there's fixed costs. There's fixed costs in the buildings, there's fixed costs in maintenance, there's fixed costs with labor. A teacher can teach 10 students or 20 students or 25. So I think that the town really should look at what the impact, whatever the development is. There should be some sort of fiscal analysis of the fiscal impact.
Does that happen, excuse me, just before we lose the plot, does that happen in the planning board? As they make a recommendation, those people here weigh in and you kind of form around one idea? Because if we separate those two, I'm afraid that we end up with great ideas, but no way to pay for them. And I'm sure we won't work that.
So there's a variety of ideas.
I realize that, there's a lot of scale.
And there's, the non-residential and the mix, and, responding to concerns about affordability. One way to address affordability is, if you do have cluster, it's lower cost for infrastructure, instead of, building out a subdivision or that, that is one way to kind of get at that affordability issue. The planning board has their role though, so that's, part of the affordability and what little can be done on the tax policy side for non-residential, building the tax base up. The planning board has their role with that too, to, perhaps, allow it in certain ways in certain places, but, it's just their lane. There's other lanes as well.
As far as the process goes, and we had talked a little bit about this, is it does make sense to have that built into the process, that fiscal impact analysis for any type of development, so you know what you're getting and whether it's gonna pay the bills or not, I guess, basically. Yeah, and I think that's something that should be part of the process.
At the end of the day, the planning board can, work on zoning that encourages certain types of construction, certain uses and whatnot. But the person who owns the property is the one who gets to decide what they are going to ask to be allowed to build on it. So our control ends at certain points and then starts up again as a duty of freedom.
Kelvin?
Yeah, we keep saying the school enrollment's declining. It's actually not. The numbers are skewed up. And I know this for a fact. We have more kids going to private schools in town, so they're not showing up on these numbers. Now my question is the planning board or the commission looking at CES to see what CES can handle? So how long is that school going to be viable for our town? If we're aging out and getting younger, how long will that school be viable, and what would our plan be for that? How do we include that into our future development plans?
These are good questions.
It's not part of this master plan process to look at the long-term viability of a school building.
Your school is 57% of your taxes. Isn't that an important thing to plan for the future?
Sure, but the planning board has their role in the master plan. There's a school district process to look at capital needs. We're basically looking at overall state enrollment numbers down to the elementary school, and the elementary school peaked 15 years ago. It's not just Canterbury. It's everywhere. It's the United States. More so in rural areas. We will no doubt have a couple of communities in our region, the 20 communities around Concord that do not have, that join together their elementary schools in the next few years because of those demographics.
So, but as a town, we don't look at that data to figure out what growth we can handle at that time. Like if we studied the school and said the school can only handle 20 more kids, wouldn't that sort of gauge how we choose to develop the town in terms of clusters or what type of housing we put in?
And the numbers that, again, peaked 15 years ago. And, we can certainly look at what the ultimate capacity is, but demographics are going the other direction.
I mean, I can tell you right now, you're short 68 students, because I looked at the numbers last night at the committee. So there's 68 kids that are accounted for in this. And we're losing an average of 5 kids a year in private school from middle school on. So the kids are still in town. We still have the kids. So I'm not saying you're wrong, I'm just saying I think it's important that we think about what we can sustain before we start growing. Or understand how we can grow at a rate to sustain that before the school handcuffs our tax base.
No, I think that is a good point. I think for any development, you want to look at not just the fiscal impact, but the fiscal impact on the school system as well. And, there are towns that are grappling with whether or not they can keep their school open, whether it makes sense from a financial standpoint. That may be something that, Canterbury has to have that conversation about at some point too.
So that's
It's not really part of the master plan, as Mike said, but I think that is a valid point, definitely.
I echo, well, it's not just the schools, it's also the infrastructure.
Yes.
It's highways, it's fire departments, it's police departments.
Yes,
It's
that's
trash
true.
and waste removal, and as most of us know in this town, in some of those areas, with no disrespect to anybody, we're behind the curve on some of that stuff. Right? And it's gonna take a lot of investment, public investment, right, by the taxpayers to try to bring some of those back to a standard that's acceptable. So, to the question being raised, that's kind of where I was going. When do we marry? I mean, this is a master plan, and how do you master plan with the other pieces collectively? So, I'm not trying to be critical of the planning team, that's not my point. My point is, how are we planning and selecting our tax and public safety and education, at least the big levers, right? But we're all trying to figure out how to move here into a place where we're communities. To me, that's a productive plan. Otherwise, we're taking a lot of opportunities, but maybe they're disconnected with what the citizenry really is trying to look at or try to do is, right? Shareholders or stewards of the land in the town. Over here.
Hi, Hope Jordan. I just want to share that 32 years ago, we were able to buy Fixer Upper is putting it generously off exit 17 for $65,000, and we were in our mid-20s. Today, we own probably the last most developable land on exit 17, about 6 acres there, and I would like to be able to consider opportunities to allow people who are young to enter this wonderful town affordably. So I guess my question is, what would be the next step for someone in our position to, like, what happens next with this series? Because we've been paying attention, but I'm not sure exactly if I know what happens after this.
You can come in and talk to us on a conceptual basis.
Oh, thanks.
But next steps in our process are, is there support? Does the planning board, kind of move forward as we're coming out of the master plan? Say, okay, well, we would like a little more density in that exit 17 area and some mixed uses. And Matt was talking about some of the tools that we can use for cluster and things like that. That's kind of that next process, and whether that goes to town meeting in next year or another year or doesn't. That's why we're having meetings like this.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Laura Rossio. I have a question about 3 mechanisms I can think of that were in the master plan from years ago that have levels our growth. One is a building permit cap, and I was just wondering, is that still in place? We had a 2% per year building cap.
I believe it's 3% and we don't hit it.
We don't hit it, okay.
There are fewer requests than
Okay.
we could have through the cap.
The second one is our frontage requirements. That significantly limits how many units somebody can put on their parcel of land. They have to have the frontage. And the third one is we have large swaths of land in this town that have no new roads allowed. And all those things combined is what makes it so that a piece of land is $600,000. And I'm not saying you don't go and look at changes to existing areas of town, rezoning them, but there are other changes that you can make, other tweaks you can make to the controls we already have in place.
And those are things that have been talked about through the master plan. We're kind of emphasizing that exits, that,
Okay.
you know, we always like talk about exit 17.
Yeah, and I think Hope and John should just go ahead and come forward with a plan, because if I was you guys, I would not be waiting for this process to finish.
You know any good engineers?
Don't hold your breath. Yes, I know lots of engineers, so,
Are there any?
yes.
No, what you want to do aren't necessarily tied in with this meeting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
understand that, but it's very interesting.
Yeah, get yourselves on the agenda for conceptual. Anybody else?
I was, okay.
There's a woman behind.
So I'm sorry that I'm being late, but as I understand, you're saying that you are asking for feedback on some of these areas you've looked at. So I want to say yes, I like the approaches you suggested to improve density, and I think we do need to improve density because we have a terrible housing shortage in this state, and this town is part of it.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I was gonna say that I understand like some of the questions that are coming up, and I wanted to say like, for me, part of the confusion that comes up is that there's so many different boards or meetings that I wish that it was a little bit more transparent, but I feel like some of the questions can probably, and myself included, be better suited for like knowing, what those different boards are and having like a clearer example when they meet.
Good point. Thank you.
And I know that that's been said before, but I feel like that's something that could be said again. Like, the schooling stuff is, you know, I'm not saying it's not valid, but I feel like there's a school board, there's a school committee, and, you know, just zoning boards and stuff like that, but I'm not sure that, I don't know, it feels like we can get identified that a little bit better.
I hate to tell you to look at the town website, because
Yeah, that's,
we all know about the town website.
we live in the same house, so.
A lot of that information is on the town website.
I want to say that I appreciate what you're doing.
And I would like to say something, for the town website, for everybody who doesn't know, I am the new administrative assistant for the town.
Yeah. Too bad, you're in the
What I'm asking for is, I am looking to redesign the website in the coming year. Unfortunately, I've found that getting into the code is actually impossible because of the contractor that was used for it initially. So I'm not able to make changes immediately right now. But what I do want is for you and everybody else in town to start giving me feedback on what things you would like to see on the website. Because that was a good one, knowing which boards are for which things would be very helpful. So if you have any ideas, I'm open to them.
How do we get over to you, Bob?
So you can email me at administrativeiassistant@canterburynh.gov, which I know is extremely long. You can also just see me in the same house, or you could use the contact form on the website, or you could, you can see me at the library. I go to the library a lot for tech help. So
What day is that?
that's on Thursdays.
Yeah.
Okay. I can guarantee you. So just let me know.
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Thank you very much.
One thing I heard recently, and you guys, those people who can verify this, but I understand one of the problems with trying to country right now is that builders find it's very difficult to build from scratch based on the cost of materials and different regulations that have to be here to it. So it almost forces them to build houses and housing that are at least upper range or upper middle range. And so I don't know if you could comment on that, is that?
Things are expensive.
Yeah. So it makes it for the builder, you might want to build an affordable housing project, but he goes in and prices it down and says, I'm not gonna make my money back, I have to build a.
No, there is a, we're kind of circling around why, all the reasons why I think housing is so expensive. I know every time I go to Belty, it's stunning how expensive it is. Sure, that's one of the issues, and, we're kind of working with what the planning board can do, and that, zoning and regulation changes, but you get into interest rates, the value of the housing, but, trying to at least make some changes to help with some of those things.
Yes, please.
Hi, sorry, I was late too, so I apologize if this question's already been asked and answered. But what is considered affordable?
That's a scary question.
It's, well, there are different definitions. But the U.S. Housing and Urban Development Department defines affordability as 60% of the area median income. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Mine
Sounds about right.
Yeah. So that's, I don't know.
And it depends on household size.
Yeah, there's some nuances to it. But
so there isn't a specific number, it's a calculation.
And it's affordable to somebody who makes 60% of the area median income, which I think
It's 30% of their household.
right, 30% of their household income.
So what is our area median income?
I think it's around 100,000, I believe, so 60% of that.
Well, maybe it's a little less than that. Not sure it's 100.
Well, I think it's, yeah, they think they use Merrimack County as for the area median income. I think that's where I was going.
So someone coming into town that makes 60,000?
Something that would be affordable to somebody, making 60,000, and they wouldn't pay more than 30% of their income for that.
I don't know if you can rent a studio apartment.
No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. You're not wrong. Like, rentals are unaffordable right now, and purchasing homes is unaffordable for a lot of people right now, and that's, it's not even a statewide problem, that's a national
Yeah.
problem.
I think New Hampshire is like third highest on rental
New
property.
Hampshire is particularly bad in this fact.
I mean, that's just a nationwide problem. I mean, since COVID, if you went to Home Depot during COVID, getting a couple 2x4s and sheet plywood, that was a retirement plan. That's how much it cost. It was ridiculous how much money you had in lumber. The supply chain was a wreck. Things are starting to come back to where pre-COVID times were, but they're still up there. So there's a lot of factors that are outside our control. What we're trying to present to the town are some options that where we get more bang for our buck, something that can be done now without changing the rural character of Canterbury. We're listening to what the plan for tomorrow is saying about that. As far as the agriculture, over half the town is zoned agriculture. It already is. So, we're looking at some of the exits in 106 for there's some opportunity there for mixed use, where we could have, like some small offices, a barber shop, or, things like, small businesses, and then have housing built above it. It's an opportunity. It's what we're looking at, what is available right now. That's what we're presenting to you guys. It's not the end-all answer to everything, but it's an opportunity that, we're trying to broadcast.
So this is really a process question.
What are the resources that are available to the planning board as you consider potential zoning changes to make sure that you understand the market and the feasibility and that it'll actually work? Well, one or two plans for tomorrow ago, there was lots of excitement over the commercial zone at exit 18. That was gonna save the tax base, but nobody wanted to go there because there's no water, no sewer. So it didn't, it's zoned that way, but it didn't really change anything. So how do we make sure that we do the things that are really feasible and saleable and there's a demand for?
I think it's just a matter of timing. What was back then just didn't catch. Maybe because of the economy, because of the finances, the interest rates, maybe it'll catch now. It's just an option.
Well, I guess I'm looking for what do you have besides maybe?
So one of the things that we're looking at as well is the possibility of doing community wells and septics and how the state has approved those and what they've approved in the past. And actually, we have a soil scientist that is going to be looking at the soils around exit 18 and 17 to figure out what the carrying capacity might be.
Just to make sure that the planning board has all the, or more information than we have right now.
Because that's a very good point.
So you guys are the resource.
We're trying.
One. Yeah.
If you know the folks who own those parcels of land, you want to encourage them to consider specific uses for it. That's an option too.
Yes, sir. Have you worked at all with the state, economic development, with economic development zones? Where we can marry tax policy? Because I gotta tell you, as a large corporate person, I'm retired now, but I can tell you that the reason I wouldn't move my plan isn't because of sewer and water. I'll come and talk to you about co-development. I'm talking about an operation that's relatively high-tech, environmentally friendly. And the last thing I would do is argue over sewer and water. I would argue about taxes. And so the reason I'm bringing up economic development numbers with you folks is if you talk that way, it also helps the person on the cost we can maybe a little more practical. Is that a resource that's available?
So one of the things that we talked about in the land use chapter is the value of the economic development committee.
Right.
And the economic development committee, I know there was a lot of work done on the industrial zone in the late 90s. That stuff, if you want to use those tools, there's tools out there like economic revitalization zones, which allows you a business owner to get a tax break on their business profits, or business enterprise tax. They hire people, they'll make investments, but it's off their state tax, not the local tax. But you just need, and I think that's an opportunity for the town to do that work, to wave the flag a bit more, and because people are, when they're choosing where they're gonna locate, the first hit is the website, and what that information they can get from that. That's all that stuff takes work. To point out those 4 parcels that are perfect for that type of development that would build your commercial tax.
I think that people are getting used to learning to live in smaller spaces. It's just obvious because you can see it, and they have it, but they don't really have to.
Sure.
Relevant to that is, I believe I have it right, ADU, you have to have 1,000 square feet. You don't have to have 1,000 square feet. You have 800 square feet. Now that saves a lot of money. It changes
I know we were talking a lot about ADUs at the board and making them more of a better option. And whether it's changing from special exception to a permitted use, they are one of the tools that can be used. And I know that there's a lot of different options for making them a more go-to tool.
Didn't the state have some ruling on the ADUs that they have to be allowed?
Sure. So, but in a zone that allows single-family housing.
Right.
But there's also an extra step and a special exception versus being a permitted use. So, you know, can you, and honestly, with the ADUs, and, you know, that, you know, it is daunting to have to go get that special exception. So you know, there's been some discussion about making it just an easier path in certain places of town.
Yes, sir.
So there's been talk about exit 17 and 18, but there's also been mention of 106. Could you clarify where we're talking about on 106?
It's on the map.
It's across from the racetrack.
There's actually there's not a lot of frontage in Canterbury on 106. It's like across from the racetrack.
Yeah.
North of the track.
Yeah, no,
North of the track, over on
That's why we're really not drawing on it, relatively speaking.
I think most people don't even realize that it's Canterbury on 106 in that area.
And there really aren't even cross streets, or it's just,
No.
yeah.
I think we almost feel that we should, if we're talking about mixed uses and commercial uses, we have to say out in 106.
Yeah. When we talk about the cluster subdivisions or whatever we bring up in terms of affordability, is the planning board gonna try to put some limiting factor or a caveat stating if so many units get put in, X percent needs to be set aside for affordability? Because if I'm a developer or a contractor and I get 20 units, I'm gonna sell them as high as I can. That's the economy, that's what you do to make money. So are we gonna try to find a way to actually make it affordable for people? Or if we change these rules, are we just gonna open the door for high-end stuff coming in and being in the same position that we are now?
We will certainly consider it.
So I would just hate to see the good intention of trying to get people to live affordably and then, you know, get the rug snatched out from underneath. I think development is gonna happen and it could be good, but we have to definitely find a way to still get the points that we're trying to get.
I just want to interject that there are not a number of nonprofits throughout the state that build affordable housing under the LIHTC program of the federal government. So there are people out there, like I think the local one is called Catch. They do a number of things in Pennacook and throughout our capital region. So there are people and entities out there that are cracking that nut, so it's not like they're reinventing the wheel.
It's not fast enough.
Well, I mean, true, but it's, that's, you know, that might be more attractive to people like that, if, you know, if there aren't. You know, if this does pass, you know, vote, and, if it has less, hurdles in it, when you change something, the less hurdles it has, probably the better off it is to succeed the way you want.
Generally speaking, yes.
I could be wrong.
Anyone else?
Yeah, have you considered or looked at, because everybody's talking about housing, you were talking about all the housing has gone up, so it doesn't matter if you're buying or renting, it's still too much money. I mean, that's what it sounds like. Even if you're doing a multi-unit and you've got 5 or 6 apartments, it sounds like it's always more money. So has the town looked at, because I know they did this in Newbury, low income housing. Using some of the land for low income housing. Because then it is low income, because they go with how much you make. And there's grants, and
Ties
there's
in
all kinds
with
of.
what Kelly was just talking about, which is exactly. Start to deal with whoever's coming in.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
One thing about truly low housing income is that unless there was a walkable center kind of a thing, they're not gonna build here just because most people who need like the really truly affordable housing also don't have cars and can't like drive to 20 minutes.
That's an excellent point. I do remember. Trust me.
There's a whole range of people that fall into the workforce housing group that they have cars and they drive to their jobs and they just can't afford to live in Concord or Canterbury or Bow or Hawkinson.
You pretty much need a car to live in Canterbury.
Yeah, I mean,
It's difficult to-
there's been workforce housing projects built every, all up and down Route 3, Merrimack, you need your car to go anywhere, it's not all walkable communities.
True.
They're built all over the place.
I guess I'm thinking of the lowest end of the affordable spectrum, so you're totally right, I'm just thinking of the people who
Yeah.
need like $1,000 or less.
That's a whole different ball.
Yeah.
I think it's worth mentioning still, though, yeah.
We could go down a whole rabbit hole
Yeah.
about public transportation in New Hampshire and how it would be really nice if that existed.
We have train tracks, so maybe
Yeah, I'll get started.
we can get one of those things.
Yeah, right.
Things the planning board does not have control of.
That's it.
Can we get one of those trains?
So part of what was identified as a theme that I heard was the character of the town. And I don't know if my question, or I haven't really formulated the thought, so it might not be the appropriate spot to ask the question, but as we're looking towards the plan for tomorrow, is there part of a committee, or is it this committee, that looks at how we can support maintaining the historic homes and the history within the town? We talked about the rise in costs for pretty much everything, and the older homes are harder to upkeep and are also an important part of our character. And so building new affordable housing, I fully support, and the idea that we still want to maintain the character of the town and the historic nature of the town. What planning or what conversations need to happen connected to that?
Well, for example, there's one of these handouts, there was a section on repurposing old farmhouses.
Last page on the demographic, the demographic, yeah, the last page of the demographic one, is that, exactly mentions what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
so rather than scrape it and build something new there, to repurpose it. It's been there for 250 years.
Or that overall design, or, it's clearly not gonna be that solid, 150-year-old building, but, that trying to just follow that style and design. And, not requiring it, but that's when the planning board has some flexibility to offer a little bit more density, if then it's developed in that manner. And that's, kind of one way to kind of bring that old style of design and rural design with some of the newer structures.
Anyone else? No? No, I want to thank everybody for coming, I really appreciate it.
I just would like to add one more thing real quick.
Yes.
And again, I'm not articulate, I'm gruff, I'm frustrated at what's happening right now. Born and raised, not too far from here, so my perception is probably different from others in this room. But I think the general consensus is people move to Canterbury because they like how it is. They like the rural character, they like being separate from their neighbors, they can kind of distance themselves and be neighborly if they want to. We all like that. I think there are a lot of outside influences impacting the town, these decisions with the changing of the zoning. And I think we as residents need to stick together to kind of combat that. Everybody says that, growth is inevitable, but it's only inevitable if we don't fight it, So I think we as residents have a duty to keep things the way they are. And I also have one last question. How much did the taxpayers of Canterbury pay for the services of the Central New Hampshire Planning Commission?
And big anything, actually, like you want to cover that?
So, we have, the town applied for a grant through the Investment Hampshire program. And that's basically a program that's helping with these planning efforts throughout the state relative to housing. And, we're actually though working on the master plan as well. We had an agreement for the master plan. It's about $15,000 over the 3 years that we've been working on it.
Thank you. Yes.
I agree. So I grew up here in town. I moved away from college. I took 2 years off, stayed away. I came home. This is what I wanted. I didn't want the Section 8 housing. I didn't want to be next elbow to elbow with my neighbors. I I like the space. Why change it? Why, I know there needs to be growth, but why put everyone next to each other? It's not this town, it's not our quaintness. People come here because of that.
Focus on things that will benefit the community, like enhancing the recycling center, which is like, it's like a third world country there. The people who work there are great, but that could be improved. Broadband, like focus on the things that will affect, that will help all of the residents, you know.
A lot of those things are outside of the purview of the planning board.
There is a requirement for a certain amount of workforce housing in your housing base and what you create. You can't just do exactly what you want. The state dictates that there has to be percentages for workforce housing.
Yes?
I just want to reiterate what I think I'm hearing, and it's not in conflict with what you're saying. I think we can have the same character in our town and allow some denser development in places where the landowner wants to do that and where it makes sense, so that the kids who come back, like you, who may not have parents who are here now or don't have a place to live, and I know there's at least one other person in this room who that applies to, there's no place for them to go. And I look at my friends who are older than me, who have big rambling houses, who want to stay in Canterbury. They don't have any place to go either. And unless we can find that balance, we're gonna lose it. And then we lose the character of Canterbury.
One of the things that often comes up when we talk about, higher density or cluster development housing is we look at places like the Spruces as an example of how this is already working in Canterbury. And I don't think anyone who drives past the Spruces and goes, this is not Canterbury, that's not okay. They've been there a very long time, and I think that's very much part and parcel of the character of Canterbury. And, another development of that nature that, perhaps was aimed a little bit more at the needs of young families rather than the needs of older people. Doesn't seem, to me, as someone who's also grew up here and was born in Canterbury in 1985, doesn't seem out of character for the town either.
Beth?
And I just want to follow that up with a little bit of context. When we do have a cluster housing situation or a situation that allows this kind of denser housing so that some of us can still live here in our later years or come back after we've been to college, that can be designed sans without granite curbing and big important entryways and things like that. It can be part of the character of New Hampshire, character of Canterbury. It can reflect that character if we write the zoning appropriately.
Thank you. Yes?
I have some thoughts on housing and how providing more housing opportunities, how having more housing really does benefit the people of Canterbury and similar rural towns. And that is, I want to age in Canterbury. Our porch is starting to rot. We so far haven't been able to find anybody to work on it. Hopefully that will happen. I know people who move to this area and cannot find a primary care physician. That's very common in the capital area. People who cannot find space for their elders or their loved ones in long-term care facilities, or who cannot find social services. Those are things that we need to live our lives, those kinds of services. And unless we somehow expand housing in New Hampshire to allow people to move into the state or to provide those services, it's really going to make it unlivable here. And I think that's also part of housing and the New Hampshire housing crisis.
Thank you.
is there a way to limit, the zoning or the building to prevent second homes? You know, we all see 93 on a Friday and on a Sunday, and there's so many people coming up from Massachusetts to go to their vacation home. And I don't think we want Canterbury to become a vacation home community.
Fortunately, we don't have a lake.
So, I mean, are there, you know, kind of speaking to some of the other points that have been made to make sure that, like, we're protecting that character? Is that part of this type of a plan, or?
No,
No, okay.
it hasn't been brought up.
We wouldn't have control over who somebody sold their house to anyways, so,
Okay, that makes sense.
yeah.
Laura, what's on your mind? Anything? No?
Just curious, what would prevent a group of residents banding together to build their own 55 and older community, eliminating a contractor and the big guy? You know, we just heard a comment that we could make it without granite posts and X, Y, and Z. If there's enough residents who want to age in place, couldn't they band together to put 10 or 15 houses down there on exit 18? Keep it the way Canterbury wants to be. They can now downsize in place, and then those younger families can take those larger homes. I mean, is there ways that we're thinking outside the box that maybe are more community-based? Because I keep hearing everybody wants to stay the same. They want the community. They want to age in place. What's preventing us from taking the initiative ourselves before waiting for a developer to come in and steer the direction?
That's kind of what this is about.
So, but I mean,
Setting our own.
but come developers, there's 10 or 15 people that want to age. How come we don't get them together to steer the reins to what they want?
That sounds like a really excellent start to the conversation. Honestly, like if
Go for it.
yeah, that's not a bad idea. I'm not trying to be combative or anything, but I'm genuinely for that. If that's something that you want to do, I'm 100% about community building. So if you want to do that, I don't think there's literally anything that can stop you from doing that.
I guess I don't understand developing a commercial zone. I don't have the funds to be a commercial developer, but if it seems like there's enough people in here that like to downsize, what's to prevent them from pursuing those avenues?
Capital. Yeah, could you please address the board? Sir? Could you address the board, please?
So, sorry.
If we start talking amongst each other, it's gonna be a really long night.
Okay, that's fine. I was saying that's a really excellent point that's made. I also don't think there's anything wrong with doing that. And I also think that that's a great opportunity to make that if there is not something for that.
I think it's unfortunate that a lot of us expect things to be done for us, rather than do.
Community is like, it has to be, you know, together or nothing, because we're all we've got.
Isn't that kind of the way the spruces come together?
That was before my time.
I know too, but isn't that kind of what happened?
Yes, sir.
I live across the road from Sherwood Forest and have got to know one or two people over there. It works. It's a community. Just saying.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
One quick point, when 30 some odd years ago, when Hope and I moved to town, the sole reason we came here is because we found an affordable home. And we fixed it up. It was from 1840s. We fixed the old house in Canterbury, and we've lived there for 30 some odd years. And full disclosure, we recently moved, but
We're still taxpayers.
still our taxpayers in Canterbury. But that was we didn't know Canterbury from anywhere.
Yeah.
We moved from Manchester. We were two young professionals. We had no money, and we found a dump that we could afford, and we bought it. That doesn't exist anymore. And if it is a dump, it's probably 300 grand.
It's a great place to raise our family.
So, that we did it.
Anyone else? Yes.
Great, thank you. Frank Tupper. Some of you may remember the cover on the town report back some time ago when Ken Williams and I got up on a list to take a picture of all the people in town who had ever done something for the town. Whether that was helping to paint the gazebo, coaching soccer, or helping out with the Halloween parade. and it was a sea of people. I don't think anybody was freeloading on that. If they are, I don't want to know about it. But it was very impressive. It sort of speaks to what that gentleman was saying back there, that there's a lot we can do. But we also need to have some structure to it. It comes to us, I think, through the planning board and the zoning ZBA. But yeah, I think that this is a town that can do. And that's another reason that I think the word spreads out and people like to come here. They like the spirit that's here.
This is true, I know that for a fact.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Beth, please.
I have one last question, and I'm sorry I was late. As we discussed development and ways to bring more families into town, how is the impact to schools being considered?
How would the impact of school being considered?
Yeah.
Say that again.
How, the impact to schools as we try to attract more families and children to town, how is that? So I'm sorry, I was late. I tried to read it in here and it wasn't clear.
So getting to the question, that's why we talked about the school enrollment numbers.
Okay.
And how basically the elementary school numbers have declined. You could certainly take a look at fiscal impact studies. Something of say 16 units or 12 units and have a fiscal impact study of that. So that's one tool that the planning board has to get at that question. Overall though, there are fewer kids.
That's surprising. So the past 2 years, we've had a record number of kindergarten classes. They had to hire an additional teacher this year. At some point, they're going to run out of space. And also, it's not just elementary school kids. We have middle and high school kids that need to be considered as well.
Sure. And we've got those numbers, and we can show you those numbers. You've got the numbers.
So it's just you're going by enrollment, historical enrollment numbers, not looking at anything else.
We've got last October's numbers.
All right, so schools are not being considered for this. You're just using. I just want to make sure this is clear.
We looked at enrollment both for Canterbury, for the town of Canterbury as a whole, looking at high school, and the students that attend Belmont, as well as Canterbury also.
So you guys contacted the Shaker Regional School District?
We looked at the Department of Education numbers.
So you didn't contact the school district?
No, we didn't contact the school.
We don't need the state numbers.
Okay.
There's numbers available statewide. Doesn't matter.
So as we look to bring more people in, I would assume enrollment would increase, but we're not concerned about capacity, things like that, everything's covered?
I think what Mike was saying is that the planning board typically, if you had a development that met a certain threshold, you would look at the fiscal impact on the schools, on the emergency services, on the town as a whole. So that's certainly what we looked at.
Okay. Because it sounds like people want to do multiple developments, not just one.
It's not gonna happen all at once. If and when there's development, it's not like there's suddenly gonna be hundreds of homes overnight. This is a thing that happens slowly over time. And I think Mike's trying to make the point that based on the numbers, based on the statistics, the school, Canterbury Elementary at least, is under capacity. And it certainly has a lower enrollment than when I was in school. And the building's bigger.
So do we look at, because the fifth graders have the option to go to Belmont, and I don't know if that's historically always been the way it is, but 15 kids choose to go to Belmont each year.
Sometimes it's like one or two.
The last couple of years,
You have a class the past couple of years, so that's another thing.
There's quite a few kids from Canterbury in 5th grade that choose to go to Belmont.
Oh, absolutely.
In 1990, 1991, it was zero because we didn't have that choice.
They also have the option for Belmont if they're able to come to Canterbury, isn't that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, please.
I just want to thank you all for the work you're doing, because
complicated, not easy for others to understand the edges and your purview, I think. So everything is connected, and people want to do everything, and that's not really your job. So I appreciate being here and having these hearings.
Thank you very much. On that note, when to wrap it up.
Yeah. Do we have a motion?
I motion to adjourn.